Welcome to the Stumbling Spirit, contemplations on the path of resilience. Whether you realize it or not, you are resilient. It's your birthright. As you take in your next breath, know this truth. It's not only about your capacity to overcome difficult situations, but it's about your courage to do the necessary work to heal, learn, grow, and move forward. What you gain is invaluable wisdom. And it's through these hard stumbles in life that we often discover a new purpose that aligns with our spirit. My name is Fabio da Silva Fernandez, Reiki Master, Mindfulness Coach, and Mystical Explorer. Join me weekly as the Stumbling Spirit podcast highlights the lives of extraordinary people like you, sharing transformative stories and beneficial practices of resilience to guide you on your wellness journey. Asia is the largest continent in the world and the most populous, with diverse peoples of various ethnicities and cultures, which extends from the Middle East to the Far East and covers the Indian subcontinent and a vast region comprised of former Soviet states. The Asian diaspora is also large and has made innumerable contributions to the growth, success, and tapestry of nations around the world. For example, in Canada, Chinese immigrants helped to build the railway, which has forever been a symbol of Canadian unity. Asians have made Canada home for generations and make up 20% of the population, yet racism persists and anti-Asian hate crime is on the rise. Helping to raise awareness through storytelling and art is Emily Gong, co-founder of Asian Arts and Culture Trust, a Toronto-based organization celebrating Asian heritage and creativity in Canada. It's a pleasure to welcome Emily Gong to the show. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Fabio. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. It's great to be here today with you.
What inspired you to start Asian Arts and Culture Trust?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So this was back in 2020. I was visiting my parents. I was living at the UK at the time. My parents are here in Toronto for GTA. And then I got locked down when I was locked down in Toronto while I was visiting them. And then I've always called Toronto home, but then realizing that there's like so much happening around with the rising hate crimes and the like anti-Asian racism. And it was just really baffling a place that I've called home is like all of this is going on. So it was myself and then my partner and some friends where we just came together because we wanted to do something about it. We wanted to use art as a way to bring people together from different walks of life, people with completely different belief systems, so that they can be in the same space, sharing conversations and hoping to increase just greater empathy. So it was really using art as advocacy to raise social awareness of what's going on firsthand from the voice of the locals.
Yeah, I was looking up information online, and some of this information I already knew. I mentioned the contribution of Chinese Canadians on building the railway, but there was also a lot of discrimination through the generations in terms of there being a head tax for many years on Chinese immigrants, and it ranged between $50 to $500 in the late 19th and early 20th century. So you can imagine that was a lot of money for anybody to pay just so that they can move to another country. There was also the denial of voting rights, which lasted for many years, and Chinese Canadians and other Asians were unable to vote until, I believe, 1948. And of course, during World War II, the Japanese Canadians were put in internment camps. So there's a dark history in Asian immigration in Canada. I just wanted to acknowledge that. And then today, when we look at the stats, the Chinese Canadian National Council reported more than 900 hate crimes in 2021, and that is a 47% increase since 2020. South Asian community hate crime has increased 3 years in a row from 2019 to 2022, rising by 143%. So, what do you think is the underpinning cause of the discrimination and hate crime that we've been experiencing?
Oh, that's a question that I think about a lot, and I don't have like a one-fold answer, but I think there's like a lot of layers. And then also of like on the other side of like as a community, what we could do. I think it really depends. Like you mentioned the different communities. So I think it's also like a lot of times it gets lumped together as Asian communities, but we really need to look at the nuances too of each group and then what point in time that we're looking at and then see it from there. So maybe if like we could narrow the question a bit.
So you started off the conversation by saying that the reason why you started Asian Arts and Culture Trust is because you noticed in 2020 that after returning home from the UK that there was a noticeable shift in
Mm,
negative Asian sentiment within your community, what you would call home, and you wanted to do something about it. So maybe let's start from that place of what you noticed at that time and what you feel were the contributing factors.
yeah, like I think that for 2020 and now like we're facing different challenges, but then they're like not that dissimilar as well. Like in 2020 it was more around COVID and it was more like East Asian communities that were targeted and so who was being impacted by that was more around the East Asian seniors and some Southeast Asian seniors as well. And that was just really disheartening to see that it's the elderly population that was being targeted a lot of times for the hate crimes that were happening. And so for ACT, when we started, we knew we wanted to work with the senior population first. So those who reside in Toronto and work with them for a longer period of time and capture what their experiences were like during COVID. So that was the first project that we did after being founded as a federal not-for-profit. And that was because we got a Toronto Arts Council Strategic Initiatives grant. And so that really opened the door for us to work with seniors who were living in long-term care homes, also like just in the local neighborhoods of Toronto. And so artists paired with seniors to really learn what was their experience like, and then they co-created artworks and then also narratives to share their stories. So that came to take shape over an exhibition in May of 2021. And this was showing at TIFF. It was really sweet that they like rolled out the red carpet, but the stars of the shows were the seniors who brought their like children, their grandchildren, and they walked it together. And just it was really like a heartwarming gathering where we could hear their stories firsthand and the artwork was being shown for longer periods of time that like it didn't really require language to communicate some of the ideas or even the emotional resonance behind the works. And then now like I started a degree in higher education as well. And you can see with the cap on international students, but also the increasing sentiments around immigration and then like international scholars. And just there's a lot of discrimination too around that, that, yeah, there's just a lot in the systems that we exist within. So that's another thing that I think is more the recent things that I think about a lot. Yes, I should also mention that a lot of the programming that we do is a direct response of what community to members tell us that there's a lack of. They will tell us, hey, we want to see more projects around this, or that we feel like there's a gap in this. Right now, we're doing one around mental health. And it really came about because we were informed by community members that there's like a lack of narratives around intersectionality, around like Asian mental health. So that's kind of how we create programming here at ACT.
You're right. There is a general anti-immigrant sentiment that is taking place, not only in Canada, but around the world. And it is very much a part of this populist movement that's happening right now, which seems to be this sort of post-COVID backlash, which I'm still trying to figure out and understand. I don't really understand it. But I really do appreciate your insights in terms of what you experienced and what you've noticed in your community. And I applaud the work that you're doing in the creation of this organization to help elevate awareness. I feel like we could learn a lot from our elders. So I really liked how you focused on that when you kickstarted your organization. The name of your exhibit was called Conversations with Elders. So, can you explain a little bit more about that?
For the conversations with elders, it really was trying to have elders at the center of the conversation, learn directly from them, but also have them just to share whatever it is that they're feeling, that's on their mind, on their heart in those moments, because it was 2020 to 2021 that this project was running for. But then we're also having a lot of components of that project go towards our current and also future programming. So it's like a continuation. It's not like the conversations end after the project's completion, but it is also because we wanted to have like just encourage more intergenerational dialogue. Like there's so much that we can learn with like elders in our family, but also in our communities. And a lot of times the elders are not the center of the stage. So we really wanted to have them to be like senior centric and then have them to kind of direct the direction that the project goes within too. And throughout it, we were able to create a lot of really great relationships with the seniors that we worked with too, as well as the artists. So yeah, it's like a ongoing thing, and the intergenerational dialogue piece is something that's like a running theme for all the projects that we do.
I think that's really important because we can learn a lot from the wisdom of our elders. And I feel like it's wisdom that can be passed to younger generations. I also wanted to mention, it just crossed my mind. If we think about what's going on with international students, from my perspective, I see it as a completely political decision to curb the influx of foreign students into the country just to appease a certain constituency. And that just demonstrates that there is a certain level of systemic racism that still exists.
Yeah, and international student, if you look at like historically and even in the contemporary context of where they're coming from in terms of where in the world, it's like very obvious too of like where we're setting those like barriers for. Like, what does this mean in terms of like even career trajectories for people in general, but also those like within academia of like their mobility or lack thereof?
I have a question for you around intention. So, you talked a little bit about what your organization does. What is your intention in terms of raising awareness about the Asian community?
I think right now there's so much that's beyond our control. So it's more like focusing in on even on an individual level, like what can we do? First, like being kind to yourself and then meeting yourself where you are with compassion, but also like approaching things and trying to like foster more like empathy through your interactions too, like approaching things with greater curiosity and finding out like, oh, why do they think that way, or what makes them feel that way, what could they be, perspective they're coming from, because we all have different positionality. But then within a community setting, like I think it's really important to have the stories come directly firsthand from the individuals who are experiencing different things. So then it's like firsthand narratives rather than that where we're dictating like or someone else is dictating the narrative. Like even for like Asian diaspora, like we can't be lumping it as one community. So we want to really like shine light on individual stories and the impact of what individual narratives can have.
I think that's so important. So, can you maybe describe the kinds of mediums that you explore artistically in expressing these ideas?
Sure. So with AACT, like ACT, the programming is really like open to the artist to decide. It's whatever they want to express in the messaging and then how they think it's best to describe it. So, for instance, this time around the intersectionality in mental health of Asian diaspora communities, like that project, and that project is called Interwoven Identities. And really, we have a lot of filmmakers who are, some of them are documentary, some of them are more like experimental, but it's like showing through like their lens around different narratives. So there's a lot of things around even like immigrant parents, but also like navigating dual identities of like what does it mean to be like Chinese Canadian, Chinese American. There's also stories around adoption, like being an adoptee from China, and then the experiences of reconnecting with your adoption family, like going to China for it. So it's the three filmmakers who are working with for that. There's also 20 really brilliant artists that we're working with that work in all different mediums, and it's extending anywhere from like installation, ceramics, painting, and then also like textiles. So it's really seeing how their messaging can be like how they use art as a vehicle to portray their stories and also the messaging that they want to get across. Because a lot of the narratives, they're so deeply personal and there's so many cultural underpinnings too. And from the perspective of being a Chinese Canadian diaspora myself, there's so much that's taboo when we talk about mental health in like our cultural settings with our immediate families, with our communities. So it's really, we wanted to create a space to share these experiences firsthand and have the space that, first of all, like has allows people to like feel like, oh, we're not alone, and it's like some collective experiences, even though they're all different, but we can have the like trust to communicate with each other. And then on the other hand, for people who want to learn more to be able to approach it, and we would welcome them to approach it with greater curiosity.
What has been the community response?
So the first show already opened at Home Fook. They're a Asian mental health organization that was founded 4 decades ago, and they're really like leaders on culturally competent care or advocating for it in the local communities. They've been great programming partners, and so the first exhibition opened there. And it was really such a different experience for us to bring an exhibition into a public space that's also a clinical space. So we had community members like that's like ACTS community members who are more like art supporters and those like who are like arts practitioners or like arts adjacent. And then Home Foods community, which were more around like different avenues that they come through, but it's all like mental health related. So then some of them are also practitioners. They could be clients. And then they could also be just people who want to advocate for greater mental health support within the Asian communities of Toronto. So bringing those two worlds together was such a great experience in terms of the conversations that opened up, but also like we experimented with different workshop activities. For instance, Home Fook has two really great facilitators who led a grounding activity through like sewing and textiles and scented pouch making. And during the pouch making, we exchanged like really personal stories. And you could feel that when they sew the pouch back up, there's a mending, something that happens in terms of your like emotional state too, of them sewing back up. It was really beautiful.
It sounds like there was a major catharsis that people experienced.
Totally, or at least for me personally, that's what I experienced doing the activity. And we were able to have everyone who attended that evening, and it was open to the public. All of our events are open to the public. Everyone are warmly welcome. It's all free and fully like accessible. And then so everyone who attended were welcome to participate in it, and the majority of people did over the span of the few hours. And it was just so healing on an individual level, but also a collective level.
No, that sounds really wonderful. To my listeners, what are your thoughts on this topic? Send me your thoughts. DM me on Instagram at The Stumbling Spirit. So let's get a little bit deeper with your exhibit. So you talked about interwoven identities. Can we talk about another exhibit that you did that challenged taboos? It was called The Bitten Peach, Decolonizing Queer Asians. Could you talk about that?
Sure, and I want to also mention that this as well as another project that was like identified by community members, and it was really led by our curator on the team. His name is Ocean Tai, so I want to give credit where it's due. But a lot of it was seeing that this is a space where there's a lack of narrative specific to Asian diasporic populations who are or self-identify as LGBTQ, and looking at even spaces in the city, because for us, we partnered with Urban Space Gallery to bring the exhibition to life. And for them, they look a lot at spaces within the city of Toronto or lack of spaces for certain communities. So that's kind of the perspective that we approached it from for this exhibition as well. But for this larger project, it was super well participated. It's still up on our manifesto space, and I think when this goes live, people will still be able to see it. It was a group of 26 artists and showing their responses, their experiences, and their lived experiences through different arts mediums.
Can you talk about the newcomer and refugee artist program that you have?
Yeah, so that one is what we're currently working on that we're going to be launching. So for that one, it was conceived of 2 years ago. A lot of artists were coming to us who were newcomers, and just the system here is the art system is quite opaque and hard to navigate, even as people who have been here for a long time. So for newcomers, they were telling us of like, hey, like, can we apply to the grants, but then we're not PR, we're not permanent residents, we're not citizens, don't have access to a lot of the funding support that artists who are citizens or PR have access to. So it was from hearing about their experiences that we thought, okay, yeah, we need to get something going in this space that's more specific to Asian communities here. So then that's how it came about. It's also another strategic initiatives grant that we got from Toronto Arts Council to do so. And for us, we really wanted to create greater, like just foster greater sense of belonging for newcomer and refugee artists. A lot of the mentors that we have working with us on it are or were the like newcomer artists themselves, and for them to be able to like look back and look at, oh, if back when I was going through this, what would have made my experience like easier, or what would I've wanted to know. And it's more how we're approaching it is more like a partnership, in that we're recognizing that there's a power dynamic that we assume when we talk about mentorship in the mentee mentor. But for a lot of our mentees in the program, they just don't have local experience. It's more that they could have had a decade of experience in their home country and they're just new to Canada. So we want to recognize that it's like a lot of learning together and co-designing programming as we go too, but we really want them to just feel empowered with more like skills toolkit to like navigate the systems here, but also like in terms of having a greater support network and knowing people here to get things going. And at the end of the program, we want them to be facilitating their own community workshops, presenting in group shows. So that will be happening in next year. So stay tuned for more of that.
It sounds like the Asian Arts and Culture Trust offers a platform for people that otherwise would not have the ability to share their work. So it's wonderful that your organization is able to do that and that people are able to see and read how they are experiencing their life in a new country.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to what you were saying about intention too. Like, we really want it to be that they are voicing their experiences firsthand and they are sharing whatever it is that they want to show. And we are able to like co-design things with them too, because we don't want to dictate the narrative and want to tell them, hey, this is how we're going to go about it. So I think this is like the intention that we create and implement projects through, but really hope that we get to a point where everything that we do is, and the outcome of everything is like aligned with this intention too. Because I think there's a lot of growth too. Like, we are all volunteer run. So there's a lot of learning that we do together, but also we recognize that we all have day jobs as well. So there's a lot that we try to balance in terms of the team members putting on these programming. And I think that this is like, having worked at a lot of arts organizations, it is challenging in terms of when there's like funding cuts, you wear multiple hats and you're maybe doing more than one person's job all the time.
What are you most proud of?
I think just the community that we have built and the relationships that we have fostered. Like, when we were starting in this space, there was a lot of different groups and different artists, different individuals, all working in different spaces. And we just really wanted to be able to like have programming that brings people together. I'm really proud that we are already doing that, and I think we're going to continue to do that. But it's really that like human to human relationship and fostering more of that, that I feel really proud of. In the world that we live in, we're constantly connected, but also there's an increasing sense of loneliness too. So we really want to have space for people to develop deeper connections. And I think that's a lot of the relationship building that we've done with ACT, or that we were able to do.
How do you see the Asian Arts and Culture Trust growing? How do you envision the future of the organization?
I see that because we have like a really wonderful team and we do a lot of like collective decision making for ACT's future. And we've done a lot of projects where it's like there's running themes through them, but we want to be able to expand from them too. Like, for instance, the conversations with elders, and then also the bitten peach and the interwoven identities. So, like, those are the projects that we've done in the past 3 years since we founded, but we really hope to grow out those too. So it's really working with more Asian senior populations, also working with more diverse populations within the Asian diaspora and expanding on the projects that we've done, but having artists or community members lead those projects to new directions.
Do you foresee engaging with different communities within the diaspora to see how they might want to engage and contribute to the organization?
Totally. Yeah. We want it to be very organic and how we evolve and grow. And that's kind of how we are where we are today, is a lot of the local partnerships that we're able to make with individuals, with groups, with other nonprofits and community groups. So there's always like, we're just looking for alignment too in terms of partners. And when that happens, it just feels really magical in what we can do together.
Is there something of your personal story that you'd like to share in terms of the evolution of your experiences in life to reach this point to create this organization?
Well, I came to Canada with my parents when I was 6 from China. So this was around 2000, the year 2000. Looking back, I think there's a lot of challenges I saw like my parents go through, and a lot of it, there was a lot of racism that they faced coming to Canada. And then they were older too, and they spoke with like an accent. And for them, they weren't able to get jobs in the professions that they were trained in and worked in for a long time, and they were already like peak in their career back home in China. And so to start out in a new country, and there was a lot of underemployment in terms of like, there's like glass ceilings. There's also a lot of barriers that they face even to enter the fields that they practice in. And because I was so young and they had to make ends meet, so then they ended up just doing jobs like very ad hoc and things that were not like fulfilling in the sense that now we talk about career fulfillment. We talk about meaning and we talk about growth and career trajectory and a lot of that. But for them to like give up a lot and then for coming to like a new country, now I think there's so much, we're doing so much better in terms of even like job openings and also training programs to bridge certifications. Both my parents were, they were engineers, but that didn't exist like back 20, 25 years ago here. And there was also like less cultural awareness, less awareness. I'm not sure, but maybe that's how it felt like also looking back. And there's a lot of like discrimination that my parents experienced too. And the work that I'm doing now in higher education, wanting to break a lot of these barriers that exist in terms of like barriers to entry for like foreign talents or like, international talents, and then having them to be able to like progress and really like realize their potential too is really important. So I think that is a running thread that I approach things like before coming back. I was studying and then working in the UK, and I worked with a lot of artists, and a lot of what I did was empowering artists to have greater mobility for their career, but also to move internationally for exchanges and to build up their CV, their experiences for like artist population of international artists going to the UK. The visa categories alone are really, really limited. Yeah, so there's just a lot of like limitations, and just like a lot of what I did for my master's research in the UK was how do we empower artists that are like emerging, and there's a lot of social economic barriers for them to. Artists are really central to the arts ecosystem, but most of the time they're given the shortest end of the stick in the system. So what can we do to create greater empowerment for them? And then after there, like I went to state to work at the university, but then I founded a startup that was more around creating greater exchange and mobility opportunities for international artists.
Can you clarify for me what is it that you are studying right now?
Yeah, of course. So I started a flex time PhD in higher education. It's my first year. I just started. It's definitely going to be Chinese diaspora communities that I do research on. But right now I'm still like not sure if it's going to be the artist route or the scientist route. Because with the Chinese diaspora scientist route, like what we see in the US too and globally, just more resistance to like international talents, and then also like a greater sense of hesitancy but also like fear for like working with partners who are in certain areas of the world. And so like there's a lot of those things that I would want to study further and unpack and see like how I can contribute to creating like systems, channels that are more open and more supportive for individuals within the systems.
You mentioned breaking barriers earlier, and so I'm wondering, is that part of the purpose of Asian Arts and Culture Trust?
Yeah, for sure. Like there's so many barriers that are spoken, but also those that are unspoken. So there's a lot of things that we want to, through collective community building, and for community members to feel heard and supported, but also for people outside the community to help them to understand what it is, just have more social awareness.
What does resilience mean to you?
So, two sides. I guess on a personal level, it's more of meeting yourself where you are, or for me, it's meeting myself where I am, and being kind and compassionate and really curious about like what I'm feeling. Why could I be feeling this way? And what are the things that I could do that's within my control? And then on the bigger scale, I think when we talk about resilience, there's a lot of feeling like, oh, it's about bouncing back in the face of challenges and all of that. But do we really look at why there's those barriers that we need to bounce back from in the first place? Like sometimes there's like a that we're like promoting resilience, but it's like it's actually because there's a lot of unjust systemic barriers that exist and that we're not actually treating the root of the issue, but resilience is promoted as a band-aid solutions. Oh, those communities, look at how resilient they are, but they're just under-resourced and they're marginal groups that are just not being supported. And then so there's a lot of that I think like whether it's education or healthcare or governance that we can do better at or advocate for like improvements. Like even within our mental health project of working with home folk, we can see how it's not even culturally competent care in my perspective, but it's culturally responsive care. It's even being responsive and recognizing what those nuanced needs of specific cultural groups are, or just seeing a patient as an individual and not like categorizing them into different things to prescribe things. And it's really treating people as people on a case by case basis because we're all quite different.
I really resonate with what you said about identifying the root causes of barriers and to have the right kind of response. One of the themes that I'm exploring in this season of my podcast is the relationship between resilience and survival, how they are
Mm,
similar and how they are different. And so I am wondering whether you have any thoughts on that.
I love that, like that you're doing this and that you're having the space for us to chat about it like this. Because I have a lot of thoughts around this in terms of like even systemic resilience, how there's almost a bit of a pressure placed on individuals or groups to be resilient when it's like, what can we ask of our systems and to do better? And that's something I think of all the time that I am studying like education. I work within healthcare and also just the, systems and society that we're existing within. Instead of like having resilience as almost a romanticized survival idea, that like really looking at it as what it is and like looking at the real needs that needs to be put in place for real change. I've been listening to Stumbling Spirit since season one. And then I think back, like this conversation we're having now, but it reminds me of the episode you did with Connie. Yeah, and the late cancer diagnosis that she had. And then it makes me think of Michelle, who spoke about like end of life care. And I think those are also like shedding greater light on our current systems and how our systems respond to certain things or the lack of response and support.
I have to thank you, Emily, for connecting back to those stories because it just really shows that there is a thread throughout all of the stories that are shared on my podcast around resilience, even though I explore it from different facets, and how your experience and what you're trying to do to break down barriers relates to those stories as well. So, thank you for that. Tell me, what are your practices of resilience?
I also make art. So I'm an arts practitioner myself. I did a like fine arts degree. I went through art school, all of that, and also became very disillusioned with it. And then also saw how like art school was not preparing artists or like people who aspire to have full-time art practices. And so that's kind of a lot of the startup and work and even like act work that I'm doing now is as response to how can we better prepare individuals that have career trajectory aspirations in the arts to really be able to do it and survive and thrive, hopefully. But there's a lot of problems in the art ecosystem too that makes it really challenging. So that's why we need to build community and do it together. But for me, like I paint I do sculpture, and there's something that's so like visceral in terms of how you feel the clay and how your body responds to it and how you're molding it in time, but also the temperature of your skin. Like if you're feeling like nervous, all of that like perspiration from the palm of your hand goes into the clay. And then it makes the working process faster or slower depending on how you're feeling that day. And even with painting too, it's really like intuitive, at least my practice is, in that I shut off a lot of the judgment, a lot of the thinking, a lot of the rational thinking. And it's really like how I'm feeling, how I'm channeling that through expression. And then you enter this slow flow state too of like you're just spreading paint around and all of that like is just channeling your feelings in that moment. So I turn to it a lot when I'm going through like grief, and I find that it really helps me to process how I'm feeling.
That's so beautifully articulated. Thank you for that. How do these practices benefit you?
Ooh, I think they give me the chance to like get back in line with myself and to like slow things down and really think about how I'm feeling and to have better alignment with myself. For me, like I experience things more like they're happening to me, but they're not me going about it. So it's really about recentering myself and then taking that moment and those breaths to align my heart and my mind and my hand in those actions to be able to go about whatever it is afterwards. But I think alignment is a key thing.
How can people reach you if they want to contact you? And how can they donate to Asian Arts and Culture Trust?
Yeah, so we can be reached by email at emilygong1@gmail.com. So that's my personal email. Also act as aact.canada@gmail.com. We're also on Instagram at aact.community. And really welcome everyone's inputs with a lot of warmth and openness. Also, welcome any contributions in terms of wanting to volunteer your time or also contribute in terms of donations. Those are greatly appreciated. We want to really make sure that artists are given paid opportunities to continue on to practice. Yeah, all of our grant funding goes directly towards the programming 100%. And a majority of that is to pay artists honorariums.
Emily Gong is co-founder of Asian Arts and Culture Trust. Emily, thank you so much for coming on the show. It really does mean a lot. And I really appreciate your insights, your wisdom, and your courage to break down barriers.
Thank you so much, Fabio. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Stumbling Spirit, Contemplations on the Path of Resilience. This is Fabio da Silva Fernandez. Join me again next week for another episode of transformative stories and beneficial practices to guide you on your wellness journey. If you wish, you can follow and DM me on Instagram at The Stumbling Spirit. Until next time, take a deep breath and another step forward on your path of resilience.